we still faithful. I'ma put it all on the table. We forever faithful. Yeah, we still faithful.
Hey, welcome to Keeping the Faith. I'm JD, and the San Francisco 49ers are just mere hours away from the beginning of the 2025 NFL free agency period, or legal tampering, whatever you want to call it, that begins on Monday, March the 10th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And now, before we get into this video, when I give you guys my thoughts on who I think the 49ers should target and could potentially target in free agency, I just want to make a quick announcement. I will be live for the start of the legal tampering period at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Monday. I should be live probably around 8:45 a.m. or so. But if you don't have your notifications turned on, make sure you have those clicked on so you know exactly when we go live. And I will be hanging out, chopping it up with you, the 49er faithful, reacting to all the news, not just the 49er stuff, but stuff around the NFL, the big news, the big signings, things that happen when that clock strikes 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And of course, give you my live reactions to anything that the 49ers may do in the opening minutes and hours of free agency. With that, I wanted to break down kind of my targets, guys that I have an eye on heading into this free agency period for the San Francisco 49ers. And the Niners have quite a few needs, if we're being real about this thing heading into free agency. I mean, defensive tackle, defensive end, linebacker, safety, cornerback, interior offensive line, wide receiver, backup quarterback. I mean, the list goes on, and I've identified quite a few targets at each of those positions that I feel the 49ers not only should target, but they could very well target for a bunch of different reasons. So let's go ahead and get on into it. Get your popcorn ready, get a drink, let's hang out with me, and let's talk about what the 49ers need to do in free agency to begin replenishing the cupboards that have become barren within the 49ers depth chart, shall we? So first and foremost, let's start with the defensive tackle position. This morning, Sunday, the 49ers announced that they released Maliek Collins, which was kind of a shocker, even though it does clear up $10 million for the San Francisco 49ers. And this comes on the heels of them already cutting Javon Hargrave with a post-June 1st cap cut. And Maliek Collins, yes, he the news was that he was released, but the Niners are trying to find maybe a last-minute trade partner to pick up some draft capital for him. But, you know, by all accounts, he's going to be released at the start of the free agency period. So the Niners now at defensive tackle have Kalia Davis, Jordan Elliott, and Evan Anderson as their remaining defensive tackles. So there's a huge gaping wound at defensive tackle along the 49ers defensive line heading into free agency. And the Niners, by reports, are potentially interested in going after former Washington Commanders defensive tackle Jonathan Allen, who is 30 years old and has always been more of a pass rusher as opposed to a run stuffer, but he's been a very productive player throughout his career. He's been a team captain. He's been a very good player, and if the 49ers could get him on a discount or slightly under market value kind of deal, the Niners were interested in him when it was coming down to the Deebo Samuel trade talks to Washington, and they ultimately elected not to include him as part of that package. Now that he's released, he's free and clear to negotiate with the 49ers, and maybe the Niners kick the tires there on a guy like a Jonathan Allen. But if they don't go after him, the next guy in line that I would be very interested in, and I'm sure a lot of Niners fans feel the same way, would be Denver Broncos free agent defensive tackle DJ Jones. Niner fans know DJ Jones well from his time with the team. He left in free agency some years back, and now he is available in going into his age 30 season, and he is still a very effective player against the run. He's always brought a little bit in terms of a pass rusher, a lot of athleticism for a guy his size, but he's great against the run and would definitely fill a need. And not only that, he's very familiar with the 49ers. He's very familiar with this scheme. And, of course, he's, very familiar with Robert Saleh, the 49ers' new/old defensive coordinator. So if they can't get Jonathan Allen, I think DJ Jones would be someone who would be a great consolation prize and potentially maybe a little cheaper than a guy like a Jonathan Allen. So those are the guys that I'm looking at in terms of defensive tackles. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments if you have any suggestions for any of these positions that we're talking about as well. Now, you move on down the line on the defensive line for the 49ers, and we go to the defensive end spot. I already dropped a video this morning regarding the news about Joey Bosa and the 49ers potentially nearing a contract. Now, what else needs to be said there? Joey Bosa, he's Nick Bosa's brother. He played with Gus Bradley with the Chargers. He fills a need at the edge spot. He's still very good against the run. Yes, he's had some injury issues, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, if you can get Joey Bosa on a somewhat team-friendly deal, on a brotherly love sort of discount, you kick the tires on a Joey Bosa and you see what happens. So, of course, we're all waiting to see what happens there. But by all accounts, it looks like Joey Bosa could be on his way to the Bay Area despite having several big-time suitors on the free agent market, the Miami Dolphins being one of them that I just read, who could try and throw a lot of money at Joey Bosa. But is his relationship with his brother something that ultimately puts the deal over the top and brings him into the red and gold? We'll see. Also on the edge, if they don't get Joey Bosa, and this is a name that I've heard being discussed quite a bit by Greg Papa, the 49ers play-by-play guy, on his weekly mid-morning show on KMBR, Khalil Mack. Yeah, Khalil Mack's 34, but he's still a very productive player. He played opposite Joey Bosa down there with the Los Angeles Chargers. And yes, he would be pricey despite being 34, but he's still got a lot of gas left in the tank. And if they can't get Joey Bosa, I would definitely be on board for them trying to see what they could get out of Khalil Mack entering his age 34 season. The next name on the list, this one I know a lot of Niner fans and a lot of people in general may not agree with, but just hear me out here. Haason Reddick. What about Haason Reddick? He's 30 years old. Yes, he had a very down year with the New York Jets after holding out upon being traded from the Eagles to the Jets. The often controversial pass rusher has been a very productive player throughout his career with the Cardinals, the Philadelphia Eagles, and every time he played the 49ers, he gave them fits. And we know how Kyle Shanahan feels about players who give his team fits, who wreck shop every time that they play the 49ers. That catches the eye of a Kyle Shanahan, and not to mention, they have Robert Saleh as the defensive coordinator. He's familiar at the very least with Haason Reddick, but I feel like Haason Reddick might have tanked his value a little bit with how things went out there in New York. And I know maybe he's a character concern kind of guy that the Niners wouldn't want to go after. But if they can get him at a value and maybe the bridge isn't burned with Robert Saleh, maybe they could bring in a Haason Reddick on a deal that works for all parties. And he's been a very, very productive edge player throughout his career. And if his head's on right, I mean, and if things work out between he and Saleh, Haason Reddick on the Niners could be a very, very fruitful endeavor, in my opinion. And then if we want to go on the value scale, a name that caught my eye is defensive end Derek Barnett, who played with the Houston Texans under DeMeco Ryans last year. Previously, he played with the Philadelphia Eagles. He had 5 sacks a season ago with the Houston Texans, a guy who would come cheaper than the other guys that I mentioned, but he's familiar with that type of wide 9 scheme, and I could see him being a value pickup if the Niners elect not to completely splurge at the defensive end spot in free agency. Moving on, let's go to the offensive side of the ball this time around. Let's go to the offensive line. Everybody that's a 49ers fan has heard the name Drew Dalman of the Atlanta Falcons at least 500 times in the last couple of months. Drew Dalman is the number one center target in free agency. He's the number one guy on the radar of all 49ers fans heading into this free agency period. But the problem there is that he is the number one center in the free agency market, and he's going to get a ton of attention from teams across the league, not just the 49ers. So if they swing and miss on Drew Dalman, and if they can't, compete in a bidding war against all the other teams that are going to be interested in Dalman's services, they're going to have a backup plan. And now Dalman, yes, we know he's familiar with the 49ers organization, being that his father played here, and I believe he went to Stanford. He has connections, he has familiarity with the area and whatnot. Dahlman would fill one of the Niners' biggest needs on the roster with an improvement and with an upgrade at the center position. But given the fact that his market is going to be so robust, I don't know if the 49ers ultimately can get that one done. And so if they don't, I think a smart move for the 49ers would be to pivot to Josh Myers, free agent center with the Green Bay Packers. He's regarded as probably the number 2 available center in free agency. He's 26 years old. He was a second-round pick in 2021 with the Green Bay Packers. He's played about 3,500 snaps over 56 career starts in Green Bay. They run a very similar system to what Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers run, so I think a Josh Myers would be a nice consolation prize if they are not able to bring in a guy like a Drew Dahlman. What say you, Faithful? How do you feel about Josh Myers being the contingency plan at center? Everyone wants the Niners to upgrade from Jake Brendel at this point. It's not any news, but I think Josh Myers would be a good backup plan if they are not able to get Drew Dahlman. In terms of the interior offensive line, guard spots, James Daniels from the Steelers, 27 years old. He was linked to the 49ers heavily during the Brandon Ayuk trade rumors a year ago, and James Daniels is a guy who I could see the 49ers potentially going after in free agency. He was already linked to coming to the Niners when the Niners were shopping Brandon Ayuk a year ago, like I mentioned. And so James Daniels is a guy that obviously I think makes a lot of sense. It's kind of common sense to potentially link him to the 49ers here again as we enter free agency. And then Patrick Mekari, a 27-year-old interior offensive lineman with the Baltimore Ravens. He has inside-outside flexibility. He can play guard and tackle. And we know how the San Francisco 49ers feel about guys who can do more than one thing, fill more than one role. And I think a guy like that could be a potential Kyle Shanahan target as we enter free agency. And now, in terms of the in-house guys, 49ers swing tackle Jalen Moore, by all reports as of Sunday morning, is expected to have a huge market for himself entering free agency. And reportedly, the Niners could be interested in getting into a bidding war to retain his services. But if he's expected to get starting tackle money on the open market, I don't see the 49ers matching that for Jalen Moore, especially, if he's just going to be the backup swing tackle. I don't see the Niners paying a guy starting tackle money to be the backup swing tackle. So we'll see how the 49ers proceed there. But that was some interesting news that came about Sunday morning in terms of the 49ers in-house free agents. At cornerback, Niners in-house guy Charvarius Ward is expected to walk in free agency. That's been talked about to death heading in to this free agency period. He's expected to move on. He wants to leave California potentially. And, obviously with the Niners cap constraints, I don't see them wanting to overpay to retain Charvarius Ward. I think they could go elsewhere with their funds in free agency. They already have Deommodore Lenoir, who they locked up long-term. Renardo Green will be entering his second year, and those are potentially, well, not even potentially, those are going to be the 49ers' 2 outside corners heading into 2025, and that makes me shift my focus to maybe the nickelback spot. Who is going to be the 49ers starting nickel in 2025? Now, of course, Deommodore Lenoir likes to rotate inside to nickel, but if the 49ers want to keep Lenoir on the outside, and Lenoir obviously can do either or, he can play outside or play the slot, it doesn't really matter. But if they want to keep Lenoir on the outside exclusively, there's a couple of guys that I have noticed that I wouldn't mind the 49ers taking a look at in free agency. And the first one, this one would be a little cheaper. This one would be a value pick. 31-year-old Mike Hilton. I like Mike Hilton, Cincinnati Bengals free agent slot corner. He's been a guy who has made a ton of plays in his career. He's always up around the line of scrimmage. He's a feisty player, a physical player. I've always liked Mike Hilton's game from afar. And if the Niners could maybe get him on a 1-year, 2-year cheap deal and bring him in, I wouldn't be mad at it. I know the Niners want to get younger and cheaper and whatnot, but if they can get Mike Hilton on an affordable deal, I wouldn't be mad at it. I think Mike Hilton's got a little bit of football left in him. Now, maybe they want to spend a little bit more money at the cornerback spot on the interior in the slot. Maybe they go after a guy like a Nate Hobbs, 26-year-old free agent slot corner from the Las Vegas Raiders. Physical player, feisty player. but he does have some injury, history, some injury concerns. But maybe that lowers his value a little bit on the free agent market. Nate Hobbs is a guy I wouldn't be mad if the 49ers took a look at when free agency kicks off. Now, of course, everyone has talked about DJ Reed, former 49er, former New York Jet. He's familiar with Robert Saleh. He's played with him twice now. DJ Reed would be, obviously, in a perfect world, if the Niners had whatever money to swing around, it would be DJ Reed coming to the San Francisco 49ers. He can play inside. He can play outside. He knows the scheme. He knows the coaching staff. He knows some of the players. DJ Reed would be the perfect fit, but the problem there is that DJ Reed's probably going to command a little bit more money than what the 49ers want to pay. So we'll see there. But, of course, DJ Reed, you cannot forget his name as the 49ers are looking to upgrade their roster. And the last guy on my list, I ultimately think he's going to be pricing himself out of the 49ers range, but that would be Paulson Adebo of the New Orleans Saints. 25 years old. He is coming off of a broken leg, but he's a guy who's very talented and does actually figure to have quite a bit of a market for himself. Reports are actually saying, though, that the 6'1" corner is going to be commanding a top 10 cornerback salary. And if that's the case, then it's not going to happen. I don't see the 49ers spending that kind of money on a corner in free agency. So Paulson Adebo, though, tall guy, size, speed, he does everything that the Niners like in a corner. And so maybe, if they were able to get something done with Paulson Adebo, I would not be upset with it. Let's continue on the defensive side of the ball, and let's go to linebacker. Everyone has talked about the Dre Greenlaw situation. I've talked about it to death. Look, in the perfect world, everyone would want Dre Greenlaw to return to the San Francisco 49ers in 2025, myself included. If he leaves, I will not be a happy 49er fan, but you need to prepare yourself in the event that Greenlaw does walk. If he does walk, then what are the Niners going to do? I'm of the opinion that if he does walk, if the Niners are not able to meet Dre Greenlaw's asking price, are they going to be able to afford a guy like a Jamien Sherwood? That's the big name that everyone is linked to the 49ers due to his familiarity playing with Robert Saleh with the New York Jets. But Jamien Sherwood, I feel like he's 3 years younger. I think he might even be more expensive potentially than a Dre Greenlaw, just because of the fact that he is 3 years younger. He had over 150 tackles last year. He's a very good locker room guy. Everything that a team would look for in a linebacker, quite frankly. And so, Jamien Sherwood, though, my big reservation with him is he's only about 215 pounds, and the Niners like their linebackers to be able to come up and play the run just as well as dropping back and playing in coverage. And Jamien Sherwood being 215 pounds, I would at least be a little bit hesitant at paying him a large amount of money and expecting him to come up and withstand the physical beating over several seasons of coming up and playing the run like the 49ers demand their linebackers do. That's my only concern with Jamien Sherwood, on top of the fact that I don't know if the Niners will be able to afford him. If they're not willing to pay Dre Greenlaw, what makes you think they're going to, want to go and pay Jamien Sherwood? But maybe if they lose Greenlaw, they get desperate and they say, okay, if we're going to pay money, we're going to pay money for a younger guy. Maybe that's what they're thinking. We'll see. Jamin Davis, 26-year-old free agent linebacker from the New York Jets. Again, you're seeing a common thread here. The Niners are going to look, I would assume, to bring in a few New York Jets players, guys that can fill needs on this team. Jamin Davis, linebacker, who also has special teams ability, played under new special teams coordinator Brant Boyer with the New York Jets. Another player that the 49ers could potentially target in free agency at the linebacker spot. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. And one of the biggest positions of need on this team currently is wide receiver. They have moved on from Deebo Samuel. Brandon Ayuk, if he isn't traded, will not be healthy at the start of the year. Most expect him to be back, November, maybe October. So the Niners are going to need to make some moves at wide receiver. And there's a few guys that I've taken note of that I would not mind at all if the 49ers, took a flyer on. And of course, you have to start every free agent wide receiver list with Davante Adams. I mean, we've talked about it on this channel. I've dropped videos giving my thoughts, but the 32-year-old former All-Pro wide receiver still has plenty of game left. He would fill that wide receiver role very nicely in San Francisco. He can still gain a ton of separation, even though he's not the speedster. There is talk that he wants to be on the West Coast, but I've mentioned on this channel, does Davante Adams at 32 years old want to come in here and block about 60% of the time? I don't think he does. I think he would ultimately be a better fit for a team, like the Los Angeles Rams or Los Angeles Chargers, where he will get more targets. They will throw the ball more than the 49ers do. And, don't get me wrong. I would love Davante Adams here, but I don't think, one, I don't think the fit is quite what Davante Adams is looking for. And two, I don't think the Niners are going to want to pay him what he ultimately will command on the free agent market. But one can dream, right? Next on the list would be 25-year-old free agent wide receiver Rondale Moore, formerly of the Arizona Cardinals, a guy that Kyle Shanahan has been rumored to like for quite some time. He can play a little bit of wide receiver, a little bit of running back, kind of a Debo light, if you will. And I think Rondale Moore would be a name to keep an eye on if they want to go back to that Debo Samuel style of player to fill the void. Next on the list is a guy who caught my attention last year big time, and that would be 27-year-old former Tennessee Titans wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. He's a guy who every time you looked up, he was making a big play last year, and he had 32 receptions for nearly 500 yards a year ago. Not crazy, right? But he had 9 touchdowns, 6 of which came in the red zone. He's a red zone threat. He's a guy who was always making big plays every single time you just looked up on while you were watching red zone. And, he's got some speed. He's a guy who was coined Mr. Reliable out there in Tennessee. And out of his 32 receptions, all but, I believe, 7 of them went for first downs or touchdowns. So maybe Nick Westbrook-Ikhine could be a name that could come in here and make some big pop plays in the absence of Brandon Ayuk while he's on the mend from his knee injury if they don't decide to trade him. And then last on my list could be a value guy who you may be able to, squeeze some value out of, and that would be 25-year-old Josh Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers. He's a guy, I believe, in 2022 had over 70 receptions. He's kind of been hit or miss ever since, given the inconsistency with Justin Herbert's play the last couple of years. But Josh Palmer is a guy who, I've always kind of liked from afar in terms of as a sleeper. And if the Niners could go after Josh Palmer and get him at a decent value, I wouldn't be mad at that either. So, Niner fans, what do you think? What do you think about Josh Palmer coming to the 49ers? Let me know down below in the comments. Let's go back to the defensive side of the ball at the safety position. And Talanoa Hufanga is expected to leave in free agency. Writing's on the wall there. He's been injured. He Niner fans love Talanoa Hufanga, but the Niners could get better at that spot if I'm just being honest with you. He's an instinctive player. He had some big moments in the red and gold, but at the end of the day, the Niners want to get, more rangy on the back end of their defense, more athletic, and get a guy who can do a little bit of everything. And Talanoa Hufanga, yeah, he's great coming up and playing the run, but in coverage, he left a lot to be desired, in my personal opinion. And so I want to see the 49ers go into free agency and address the safety spot potentially. And of course, in the draft, if they picked up a safety, that would be great too. But in free agency, the Niners have been linked to former Kansas City Chiefs safety Justin Reid, who of course is Eric Reid's little brother who used to play with the 49ers. Justin Reid, though, look, I don't see the Niners spending that kind of money to go after Justin Reid in free agency. If they did, I would be very, very shocked. But nonetheless, it has to be mentioned that the Niners have been linked to have at least been sniffing around on Justin Reid. Javon Holland, Bay Area guy, Dolphins free agent safety. I believe he's 25 years old. He has a lot of the traits that the 49ers will be looking for with a rangy safety. But again, money. Are the 49ers going to pay top flight money to one of the big name safeties out there in free agency? I don't see it. Especially, they may like Jair Brown just enough to say, okay, let's roll with Jair Brown, maybe draft someone and get value out of the safety position that way, as opposed to going out and spending big in free agency at the safety position. But if they do go out and spend in free agency, there are a couple guys that caught my eye. Of course, Ashton Davis is a name who's been linked to the 49ers heavily entering this free agency period. 28-year-old free agent. He is from Santa Cruz, California. He's a Bay Area cat. He played for the New York Jets under Robert Saleh, has some special teams value as well. Ashton Davis is a guy who keeps getting, linked in with the 49ers at every turn. So if he is a 49ers safety in the near future, I would not be shocked at all. And then last on my list is a guy the Niners kicked the tires on a year ago, and he's available now, and he has connections with new 49ers assistant defensive head coach Gus Bradley, and that would be the 26-year-old Julian Blackmon, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts, who played under Gus Bradley for 3 years out there in Indy, and he is available again. He can do a little bit of everything. He can cover, he can come up and hit. He's still young, and he may be, a value signing in free agency. He's not going to command top dollar on the free agent market, and he could come in here and fill a role for the 49ers. And I think he would probably be an upgrade over Jair Brown. So keep an eye out on Julian Blackmon as a guy that the 49ers were interested in previously, who they could very well again want to kick the tires on. And then the last position in free agency I want to see the 49ers address is backup quarterback. Brock Purdy has not finished 2 out of 3 seasons as the starting quarterback for the 49ers. He's had injuries. He's a smaller stature guy who's had shoulder problems, elbow issues, broken ribs. I mean, Brock Purdy's been beaten up a little bit, and his size seems to be to his detriment sometimes. And the 49ers need to insulate themselves with a veteran backup quarterback. Josh Dobbs, Brandon Allen are both expected to move on in free agency, so the Niners will need to go out there and get a veteran backup quarterback, and I want them to draft one as well, but they need to come away from free agency with a legitimate backup quarterback who you can, feel comfortable with if Brock Purdy were to go down for a period of time. And of course, the first one on the list who has also been linked to the 49ers entering free agency is Joe Flacco. 40 years old, but he can still sling it. He was with the Indianapolis Colts last year. Prior to that, he was with the Cleveland Browns. But Joe Flacco still has a big arm, still can run the NFL offense, and he's reliable, man. He's reliable. He knows what to do out there. So if Brock Purdy were to go down, you could bring in Joe Flacco and, at the very least, keep the ship afloat until Purdy was able to return. So, but aside from that, I wouldn't mind seeing the 49ers potentially bring back another old friend in Nick Mullins, 29-year-old free agent of the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, the Niners very familiar with Nick Mullins during his time here, and maybe the Niners could bring back another familiar face since they're doing all sorts of reunions, and maybe they bring back Nick Mullins to be a backup quarterback for the 49ers. But there you have it, 49ers fans. I know not the shortest video in the world, but I've been wanting to put this one out, and I wanted to get it out there prior to the start of free agency. So let me know what you guys think down below. Leave some comments, hit the like button, all that good stuff. And be sure to have your notifications on so that when we go live Monday morning for the start of free agency, you'll know when we go live. I'm looking forward to it. I cannot wait for free agency. What about you guys? What are you looking forward to seeing the Niners do in the next coming days with the 49ers, diving headfirst into the free agent market? Let me know down below in the comments. Until next time, let's go Niners.